Everything is dual. Everything has poles. Everything has its pair of opposites. Like and unlike are the same. Opposites are identical in nature, but different in degree. Extremes meet. All truths are but half-truths. All paradoxes may be reconciled. Everything is and isn't at the same time.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the first episode of a new podcast called Magical Writing, the podcast that is going to show you some occult principles in order to help you improve and master magical writing. This podcast is hosted by myself, Joseph Sale, and the great S.C. Mendes, author of The City. And hopefully it started off as a pilot run. We had a pilot episode and it went so well that we decided to make this into an actual thing. So hopefully you will join us on this journey. Thank you very much, S.C. Mendes, for setting this all up.
Thank you. Our last conversation was so much fun. And I don't think I've had a good conversation with that with a person I've never met before in real life. I guess I would say we've conversed on the internet, and it was like, wow, talking to you was like talking to one of my close friends. I felt like I could discuss a lot of these things, and that's rare to find in the world sometimes. And so I was like, let's do this. And it is so fantastic to be working on this. And today, polarity is probably one of my favorite topics ever to discuss.
Yeah, it's an absolutely fantastic topic, and it was teased in our last talk, and a few people asked, well, what do you mean by polarity? And we didn't have time to get into it then, but perhaps you can give us a rough outline then of what you mean when we discuss polarity.
Absolutely. So I think any definition of polarity has to first come from the Caballon. And if anyone here is not familiar with it, it is a book. I want to say it was very early 1900s, maybe 1903, but it was written by just the three initiates. And you can very clearly see the background of these three initiates. But here's one of their quotes on the principle of polarity. Everything is dual. Everything has poles. Everything has its pair of opposites. Like and unlike are the same. Opposites are identical in nature, but different in degree. Extremes meet. All truths are but half-truths. All paradoxes may be reconciled. Everything is and isn't at the same time. What kind of a definition is that? Like, that just blows people's minds. So to kind of put it in perspective, if you're thinking, how can things be and also not be? When I taught this in the classroom, and Joseph, if you would be so kind, I'm going to pretend that you are my student for a second, and you are walking into my classroom, and on the well, it's not a chalkboard anymore. Now we have whiteboards and but it says, hey, as you sit down today, look at the desk in front of you. Is that desk moving or is it stationary? There's no right or wrong answer. I just want you to pick what you think it is and tell me why. So take a look, Joseph. Is that desk moving or is it still?
You know what? Looking at the desk and the grain of the wood, it does kind of look like it's moving. So I'll go with moving.
So you're going to go with moving. Is it because of the way the grain is? Is that why you would say it's moving?
Yeah, the way the grain is, it looks like it's in motion. So
okay, that is interesting. And I would say, does anyone else have some other ones? And I'd get some more hands, and then someone would say, well, it is moving, but for a different reason. And again, you ask why, and they usually say, well, they get really technical, some of the kids. We're on a planet because they think they're so smart, and we're turning, so it's technically turning, and we're going around a solar system. Like, very fascinating. Okay. And someone else is, that's stupid. It's not moving at all. Look, I'm looking at it. It's sitting still. And usually there's a third answer. And the third one is usually a student who says, well, actually, if you could look with a microscope, you would see that the desk is made up of these little tiny atoms that are constantly moving. And then, so yes, it's moving. And what is the only thing that changes in all of those answers, because they're all correct? Perception, right? Your perspective is the only thing that has changed. And I think that is the best way that you can view polarity, is this idea that there is some objective reality, but you only see it from one side. So taking it on a much easier one, think about an infinite thermometer. And at one end, you have hot, and at the other end, you have cold. But there is no absolute point where you could say, this is hot or this is cold. You're just continually moving. It's like a number line. It's infinite because you can always take away one more unit of heat, and they can always be a little colder or a little colder. And this is with everything in our current reality. You have up and down, hot, cold, day and night, right and wrong. And the closer you put yourself towards one of the extremes, we say that you are polarized. This objective reality, though, is always just a temperature. So if we're talking about it's 76 degrees, that's just what it is. Maybe it's the sun is out, maybe there's some clouds, but if you view it hot or cold, that's completely on you. And so I think what I would love for our listeners to start looking at is every topic is this way. Just think of this thing, and as you change yourself, you now view it from a different angle. And that's kind of what a degree is, right? It's a measurement of an angle. Here's this thing. I view it this way. I have a perspective, but if I change just a little bit, I learn something else new about it, just a little bit. Consequently, that's why we get degrees in college, I assume, right? Because we're supposed to be learning a little bit more and a little bit more. Why this is so important to magic is because polarization, that's what magic is, right? You either want to attract something to you, you want to bring something towards, or you want to repel that thing away. It's like poles of a magnet. And the beauty is you get to decide exactly what you want. I'd say the biggest problem, though, is changing that perception. Isn't that the hardest thing to change on a person? But if you can do it, limitless possibilities just open up to you. That's what I would say.
Amazing. That's so fascinating. And when you were talking about changing your position where you were, I couldn't help but think of a pop culture reference. So please forgive me. In the light of the Caballon, it seems quaint, but that line in The Matrix where the child says, it is not the spoon that bends, it is yourself. I think that's really, really profound, this idea that you change your own perspective in order to access new possibilities.
Oh, absolutely. And I remember that being one of your favorite movies. Again, I'm there right with you. So if someone hasn't seen that first episode we did, Star Wars and Matrix constantly.
Yeah.
It's so true. But when you talk to somebody and you're in it, and they're so ingrained, like so polarized on the other side, they just can't see what you're talking about, right? And it's like, no, it's impossible to bend the spoon unless I physically do something to it. But you're right. And so some people they're just polar. I don't know what you would say, but I think like the majority of our population is highly polarized in several topics. And that's this whole triggering culture. You get so bothered by something and you say, oh, that person made me mad. What you really should be saying is you allowed that person to make you mad.
Yeah.
They just said words, but you took them in a certain way. Why did you do that? I wonder, you're very polarized.
That is amazing. And yes, certainly it speaks to I think this is a great topic because it does touch on something that is I was about to say a zeitgeist, but just such an important theme for our times. It's the same in the UK. We had Brexit and we have, we had an election and we've had all these issues that have been hugely divisive, and they seem to me to be more divisive than they've ever been in the past. Even it's become worse with the divides, not less divisive. But on that topic, then you've hinted at it already. But how can we use depolarization, or how can we get away from becoming polarized, and how can we use that for our benefit, and I guess also the benefit of others, if I understand correctly?
Yeah, I always like to say it's a benefit to others as well. And that's why, all these things that we talk about, I think we mentioned in the last episode too, they can flow both ways, because we just said right and wrong, believe it or not, is probably very fluid. And I know a lot of people don't want to admit that, but some things that are right in one situation could be drastically wrong in another situation. So when I say that, like, just be thinking on all these things. I want the audience to be thinking about that, but it is beneficial to others. So if we depolarize ourselves, and I should go with another initial warning, we never want to completely depolarize. To to depolarize completely would be stagnation, would be like death. So we think of it as like a battery, right? There's a positive and a negative charge. This energy flows through our reality and through us constantly. We need both of it. Our neurosystems, are a horrible way of saying that, but our body systems have excitatory neurotransmitters and they have inhibitory neurotransmitters. Yep. There's times when we have to get excited, we have to jump up, but then we got to bring it back down. And so we never want to just completely depolarize, I guess, and not to say anything bad about monks, but I think about this Buddha that meditates like for weeks on end. He can survive on a single grain of rice. He's not really doing, he or she is not really doing anything. They're completely just at rest. And so I don't think anyone here wants that. But the goal is to depolarize yourself enough that you can now see multiple viewpoints. You start to see other people's stories and you understand them more. And in that regard, when you can see multiple viewpoints and you're no longer stuck in the perception that you grew up with, or your family's paradigm, or your political paradigm, whatever it may be that you thought was the only possible way, and everyone who didn't think like you was crazy, you can suddenly move to more advantageous poles for yourself. Because we're usually the ones stopping ourselves from success. More often than not, it's always us. And you know that as a motivation guy, like you know that stuff very well. So we're the ones mostly stopping ourselves. So if we can move to other viewpoints, we can now open up doorways for ourselves. And I like to think of tarot. I like to think of the High Priestess card. Hopefully we can put that one up on the screen since I don't have my deck with me. Oh, he's got it.
Of course.
Of course.
I made a point of it as well when I realized what the topic was going to be.
So as he grabs this card, the High Priestess is sitting between two pillars, and the two pillars are black and white. And she sits between them, and in her hands is the Torah, which is the book of the law. And it's so fascinating that, well, also, if anyone here is into Kabbalah, if you take the tree of life, there it is, and you put that card up against it, those two line up on the outside, and it basically like the structure. And the High Priestess sits in between, and she has the Torah, which is the book of the law, or wisdom, or the revelation of divinity to us, meaning I understand the paradox. Whereas other people are, this is crazy. This could make you go insane because it's absurd to think that things are and are not. How could that be? But when you're in between the poles, so to say, or at least not maybe depolarized, but you see them, suddenly you get the game. The game opens up to you and you go, oh, I can do this. And talk about the most polarizing topic possibly could be the Bible. I know the Torah is technically separate, right? The first 5 books, but what a book of contradictions that on one surface is so polarizing and inspires people to hate, and on the other side brings so many of us closer together. Yeah. You see the poles and suddenly you can now move at will. Again, the benefit to others, it's the empathy and the understanding, I think, trying to help others in that regard. You no longer view them as others. They become more like you, an aspect of you. For other things, it is a time saver. I have gotten roped into arguments, both online and in person, and I realized, well, that's silly. Because when you're depolarized, when you see these triggering topics, like you said, the Brexit, whatever else is going on in your country or in your social life, you want to insert yourself. You want to try to argue your point. Be like, no, you guys are wrong. I need to fight for this. And I do agree there's a time to fight for things, but there's also a time to step back and pick your battles. If you're arguing with some troll on the internet, they're the ones that's winning, because what are you doing? You're not actually doing anything that solves the problem when your time could be better spent. You're involved trying to convince this person as a keyboard warrior that you're correct. They have all total control over you. Yeah. They took all of your time, all of your energy.
You're just feeding them energy. They say don't feed the trolls, and yet it's still such an easy trap to fall into, isn't it? What we direct our energy to, whether it's good or positive or negative energy, hate or love and affection, like we feed that thing. And they say often, don't they, like the opposite of love isn't hate. Actually, they're like closer together than you think. Like the opposite of love is like indifference.
Interesting, right? Again, that's that spectrum. And you get to a point where you like, well, I don't know if I like or dislike this thing. It just is, right? And yeah. And that's what it is. And you know, as magicians, that wherever your attention goes, that's where your energy flows. And you're just probably attracting more and more of that thing. Even if you say you hate it, it's just becoming more and more you. It's what you spend all your time on. And so they've won. So it's a time saver. Your time now can direct to things you can say, okay, what's really the best thing? What would change this topic that I'm upset about? Do I get involved in politics? Can I start a grassroots campaign? Who are the people I should work with? Who are the people I should stay away from because they're not working for me? Other benefits are you can evaluate like trends that are going on. You can see through the advertising. Now, Starbucks is a company you have in the UK, correct?
Yes, yeah.
They're everywhere. So
they've infected the world now. So
They have. So here in America, and I don't know if they did this over there, but they used to have this holiday themed cup that would always go out that people would rave about. They were very happy. I say holiday, but let's face it, it was pretty much a Christmas cup. That's what it was. It had Christmassy themes on it, even if maybe it wasn't, a manger scene like Santa Claus.
Non-denominational, but essentially Christmas. Yeah.
Essentially Christmas. And this became a really big thing and people loved it. And then one year, and I want to say it was maybe 2015, it all stopped. And suddenly the cup was just this like red cup, and that was it. And I think, I don't know if it started with a preacher or if it started with a different side, I'm not sure, but he went up and said, oh my goodness, they are trying to take the Christ out of Christmas. They hate Christmas, just using words that Starbucks didn't exactly use, right? And this inflamed a whole other section. And then there was another group that was like, well, this is fantastic. They're recognizing a season of joy and of giving. And that's way better than just focusing on one, religious belief. And so you now have these two sides. One side's like, boycott Starbucks. The other side wants to have Starbucks. So I do think that these corporations, maybe not everyone in it, but the people at the top, they understand this. And sometimes, they say there's no bad publicity. Take that with a grain of salt, authors, because you might not be big enough yet to get away with this. And we're going to have a topic all on that. But you can create a controversy and in effect have everybody focused on you, and your company wins no matter what. You get in new people who just want to shop with you because they just hate the other group. And you got the other group who's now trying to, go somewhere else. And that's really the thing. So you get to extricate yourself from all of that and objectively observe it, and then just choose what you want to support rather than being moved by others. I think that's the really big one. The one problem that comes with this, though, even though you can empathize with others, you also start to feel isolated to a point. And so you must be careful when you do this, because if you suddenly can't relate to one side or the other, well, us as humans are social creatures. We want to have a tribe, for lack of a better word. You're going to feel like maybe you don't have that group. And so that's not true. Don't think that way, anyone out there. People like Joseph and I might be your group, this group who knows that there's, this paradox out there, and we're willing to talk about it, and we're not afraid to talk about it, but we also don't jump to one side or the other. We have beliefs. You and I probably have differing beliefs on certain things, but we have a lot in common. And so these type of people start to become your group, and you get a very tight-knit group of these people, and that then becomes your tribe as you depolarize.
I hope this isn't too much of a tangent. I love everything you said. And it's such a great example with the Starbucks incident. But like a lot of the time when people use the term, for example, like diversity, they use that term only to refer to things like, skin color or gender, or these very kind of, I guess for some people it's an internal thing, not an external thing. But I often think, when I think diversity, I think like diversity of opinion. And I have a really wonderful group of friends from my hometown, Bournemouth, where I grew up. And there are 9 of us, and which is hilarious because it's kind of like Kabbalistically secure.
But you almost got your group.
We kind of have these incredible differences on some quite fundamental things, and there are, everything from very devoutly religious people to UFOologists who are convinced it's all aliens, to atheists, to everything in between. But we have a shared respect for one another that has facilitated a friendship of 20 years or more. And, obviously a lot of shared experience as well, which helps that. But I think it's really interesting that when we talk about diversity, we should also include as you say, like a diversity of opinion and ideology. And that's very healthy, and therefore we can learn from what the other person is doing or saying. And we can only do that if we become not fully depolarized, as you say, but we start to step away from wanting to be polarized.
Absolutely. And isn't it the most beautiful thing when you've gotten older in age and you can look back and say, I've had a friend for 20 years. Like, that's amazing. You guys grew together rather than growing apart. That's amazing to hear that. And that's exactly what it is. In a group of those kind of people, and we can go on this tangent because it's great. They always say that you want to have in Kabbalah, you have a small group, and the people are different because they bring something else out in you, and they give you that side that maybe you didn't see. And so in that group, when you're starting to, I don't know, error or go off on a different tangent, someone else then says, oh, no, look at it this way. And you suddenly come back, and they're there. That group is there to help you, and you're there to help them. And it's like your checks and balances. And you do, and you move forward towards a goal in your group, even if you don't say it as friends, but you have a goal. There's something you're all seeking together, and together you get there. And I love it. And I can talk about UFO stuff all the time. I love that stuff. And I've gone back and forth from no nonsense to, wait a second, a UFO or an alien just means not of this reality. What's the difference between an alien and an angel or a demon? So it's very perspective.
I had that exact moment. And in fact, it's very relevant to polarity, because I was introduced via another friend to a guy who was very deep in UFOlogy. And, I felt in myself my kind of resilience immediately. I was like, this is all a load of rubbish. And, I've gone down this more magical path and da-da-da-da-da. And then I forced myself, I thought, no, don't view him as a tinfoil hat guy. Like, listen to what he has to say. And actually, and also, to be fair, my friend, he likes to stir up a little bit. So he kind of introduced him as the scientist and me as the mystic, and that we were bound to be at loggerheads. But actually, when we talked, we realized we did agree on a lot of things. As you say, there was a huge amount of common ground and interesting things, and he'd done his research and he was interested in what I was saying. And, so it was that could have easily been a huge argument, a huge moment where we disagreed and the friendship group was divided and split. But I kind of really forced myself to overcome those initial feelings of like, well, this is anti what I'm doing. And I actually realized, no, actually, it's not anti what I'm doing at all. There's no reason he can't do what he's doing and I can't do what I'm doing, and us have really great kind of conversations as well. So that's a really great point as well.
Absolutely.
Well, I guess maybe we should ask the question of what you think the most polarizing topic is, and whether you think writers should avoid polarizing topics when they write.
So, ding, 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 survey says COVID-19 would probably have to be the most polarizing topic nowadays. Prior to this, it was always politics and religion. And then here in the States, media has found a way to tie all three of them together and create this stereotypical person who either does or doesn't believe in this virus called COVID-19 or how to combat it. And that right there is kind of the problem. They treat every issue as if it's only two-sided. So instead of polarity, thinking of it as this spectrum of hot and cold and that there's varying opinions and overlapping opinions, they make it sound like you've got a coin. You're either with us or you're against us. And they make this division and they force people to choose effectively. You have to say, okay, well, if you don't believe in COVID, then you're obviously this kind of person, X, Y, Z. And they tend to more often, not here in the States, label us as I don't know exactly what it is in the UK, and it's not because I did barely want to follow my own politics. I don't even want to get wrapped up in another country's. But we have like this idea of a right wing, a conservative, maybe a highly religious person, and they tend to be not tend to be, but they're described as fascist or all these other things. That suddenly becomes the person who doesn't believe in it, when you could look and talk to these people, and that's not really the case at all. Just like you can't say that the other side is all this, hippie love, communist. It's like, look, they just want a couple programs that are helping the society. You know, that doesn't mean they're Joseph Stalin or whatever. So there's that thing, and it's just not fair. The objective reality is that there is a virus called COVID-19, and it makes some people extremely ill, and it does almost absolutely nothing to other people. And I'm not basing that just on news reports. That was just my life, because I mean, I know people who've got it and contracted it, and it was different in many, many people. And so that's the reality. Whether it evolved from naturally from a wet market in China, or it was created in a lab in Wuhan, it was released on purpose, or it wasn't released on purpose, or masks are the way to do it, or lockdowns, or vaccines the only way to save a life. That's your subjective reality. I know that upsets a lot of people, but heck, I mean, if you really want to think about it, we breathe in viruses daily. Like, your body is just a cesspool of it. Some make you sick, some don't. Why does some person who never smoked get lung cancer, and someone who smoked their whole life, they're rocking out at 90, they're drinking whiskey and smoking the same cigar, they're totally fine. And yet the media goes on there, and the talking heads, and they say, well, look, the fact is, fill in the blank. But the fact is, all truths are but half truths, and what works for one person doesn't work for another. So that's where my mind is right now, the most polarizing topic. And people who can look at this objectively, like you and me, and see both sides, are going to make the decision that's best for them. And we don't really like to be told by anybody what to do, yay or nay. We will make our choice based off of our best interest, you know? And if that means, you know, locking down, that's totally fine. There's been times where I stayed inside because I had a mom who was at risk, and I wanted to visit her on the holiday, and I didn't want to upset her. And so if I went out, even if I felt comfortable as a younger man, I didn't want to bring something to her. So these are all my decisions, just like they're your decisions. And that's the kind of society I like to live in. But there are other people who this alone will bother them, right? And they'll probably turn off the channel right now. But that's okay. For everyone else who sticks around, Joseph, I want to throw it back at you first. What do you think are the most polarizing topics, or should we write about polarizing topics? If I flip the script first.
Oh, of course. Yeah. Well, I mean, first, before they do click off this video, if they could just leave an angry comment below, that would be fantastic for the algorithm. But I
agree 100%. Yeah. Get mad. Please leave a whole slew of comments.
Yeah, leave more than one, please. Absolutely. Oh, I don't know if the microphone can pick that up, but someone upstairs is angry, clearly. But
like, stop talking about COVID.
But in terms of should we write it, you know, when I think of polarity in writing, I always, for some reason, the quote from two quotes from the same Shakespeare play, Macbeth, come into my head, which is Lady Macbeth says, "Your face, Thane, is as a book where men may read strange matters," right? So she says, I can see everything in your face. I can read all your thoughts. In the very same play, King Duncan says, there's no art to find the mind's construction in the face. So no one is readable, right? Yeah. Like the exact opposite. Both are very famous quotes. Both are often, you know, in the top kind of echelon of Shakespeare quotes. They come from the same play, and they advise completely opposite perspectives. So I think it should be right about polarizing topics. Absolutely. And funnily enough, I'm reading at the moment a very famous book, which is War and Peace by Tolstoy. It's in the title, isn't it? It's like two massive polarizing opposites, and something emerges from the extremes of these, or the energies, these two energies almost pushing against each other, but also pulling away from each other. And from that, you get this kind of jewel in the middle that is really, really incredible, and can show you a form of truth. So I think, yeah, we should take on, but I think I would, like you said earlier about a grain of salt, I would caveat that writing only for shock value or only to infuriate people is not a healthy practice. And actually, personally, I can't write from the intellect. I can't, if I don't have any kind of feeling in it. If I'm doing it just with my head, I run out of steam. I can't maintain it. I have to like feel some kind of emotion, some powerful emotion to actually be able to write at all. So I couldn't just come up with a COVID story to annoy people. It just wouldn't happen. But yeah, I think if you have a feeling about something, like whether it's religion or whether it's COVID, and the feeling is strong enough, and you want to explore that, do it. But like Tolstoy, like Shakespeare, like, you know, Mary Shelley as well, and Frankenstein, there's a lot of polarization in that. Like, explore it from both sides of the coin, and in a way that will write your story for you, because it can't help but produce an interesting outcome, I think, when you have these two things set against each other. So I hope that kind of makes sense. And
yeah, I mean, I think you picked like the two best quotes. That's perfect. And that's what our writing should be. If you've depolarized, you can now create these two characters who are opposite in an intelligent way. Because you, like you said, you're not just going to write this story about COVID, because that's not powerful. I feel the same way too. I don't want to beat over the head with it. So authors, I would say, do it in a subversive way. Have your characters, have them in a situation, but it's more the moral or the themes that people are seeing, and they can now apply them to whatever topics they want to in life. So you write your story, and you know, it can be Lord of the Rings, Star Wars. You could say it's about the Empire and the rebels fighting, but who's the good guy in the rebels or the Empire? Make the story, and then let people take from it what they want. And I think that's exactly it. I'm the same way. I don't want to write to inflame anyone. And I think if you do that, yeah, you're a troll and you're looking for a reaction. This is what you want. I would also say for authors, this is me personally, I would also not get on a soapbox then when you're on interviews and stuff, and maybe jam what your viewpoint was down people's throats. I think you should let your stories talk mostly for you, and be a very open and open to everybody kind of author. That's what I like, because I want, again, as you said, I want readers from all different facets of life, because when readers leave me comments, I get to see something in the story that I didn't even know that I had written, because I was just writing this character flowed from me. And I said, wow, I really identified with that. Here's what you were trying to say. I'm like, did I try to say that? Sure, I did. Great. But it connected with someone who I would have thought we were more polarized. So yes, write about it. But write about it, as you said, with some tact, and make it a true story, and make these characters real, and have the story speak. And you don't have to say so much then. The story speaks, and everyone interprets how they want. And not everyone's going to like your story, but some people will really connect with it.
I think that's amazing advice. And just one small thing to add to that is, I always think that when you read a book that is very much a moral message, flimsily wrapped up in a narrative, like, you know, all the rich people have to die because rich people are evil, and you know, that's the genius of Tolstoy. And you know, clearly he's very borderline communist, you know, very much for the kind of you know, the small man in his day, what would have been called the peasantry, but you know, now we wouldn't use that terminology. But yet all these incredible wealthy characters in the novel who are so sympathetic, who are so moving. And I also think of the example of Christopher Marlowe, a magical playwright, so very appropriate for this podcast. You know, he was an atheist, yet Dr. Faustus, if I feel that if Marlowe had been writing something that was only designed to confirm his own viewpoint, then at the end all the demons would turn out to be fake, and you know, nothing would happen. But actually at the end, Faust is dragged to hell, and he does suffer an eternal torment, and he has made a terrible mistake, and it's all real, all of it. And even though Faust says at the beginning, oh, this is hell's a fable, and you know, so in a way Marlowe wrote something directly in contradiction to his own beliefs, or supposed own beliefs. So I do wonder whether deep down there was a fear that perhaps some of it was real.
Yeah.
But, you know, I think that's really fascinating. You know, writers taking on, not only taking on a perspective that isn't their own, but actually committing to that to such an extent that you subvert the ending to your story, to actually kind of more align almost with the view that's not your own. You kind of challenge yourself to see it that clearly from the other side. I think that's really impressive, and that's why that of all his plays, that's the one that we remember and survive for 400 years.
Exactly. Beautifully put. In fact, I don't even think I should add more to that, because that is true. So authors, that is what you want to do. Challenge yourself, play around with it, embrace the absurd, and see what it does to you, because that's what this world is all about. I think anyways. And it's just a book. At the end of the day, if it was a flop, go write another one, and it's okay.
Perfect. Well, on that note, we will see you in the next episode.
Excellent.